book is called Ida B. the Queen. I love the title, The Extraordinary Life and Legacy of Ida B. Wells. If you're looking at this on my YouTube page, you could see the book. It's really beautiful. Tell us about it for folks who don't know.
Well, the book is about my great grandmother's life and legacy. Ida B. Wells was a trailblazing journalist. She was an anti lynching crusader, a suffragist, a civil rights icon. She also, later in her life, got involved in social work. And she actually ran for state senate in the state of Illinois, as well as she was the founder of the NAACP. So she did quite a few things during the course of her life.
It really is an extraordinary life. And I think one of the things that I think of, I'd love for you to speak to this. I also think of Ida B. Wells as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, because she owned newspapers. I mean,
Yeah.
this is unheard of for the time. This is wildly unheard of for her to be black, be a black woman, and own not just one like other newspapers. Can you speak to that?
Right. Well, she lived in Memphis for about 10 years. And while she was there, she was asked to, she had developed her relationship or her reputation as a journalist and was asked to be the editor of what was called the Memphis Free Speech and Headlight in 1889. And she negotiated so that not only would she be the editor, but she would also buy into the newspaper and become one-third owner. After she was run out of Memphis because of the editorials that she was writing about the realities of lynching, she made a deal with T. Thomas Fortune in New York City to co-own the New York Age. And then she later ended up owning the Conservatory newspaper. She bought it out from her husband at that time. So yeah, there were 3 different newspapers that she had full or partial ownership on.
Yeah, that is. I mean, we have to always honor her work as a journalist and covering lynchings like nobody was at the time. But I think it's really important to point out that she was a business owner. Do you have any idea? Because I'm working on a project and I've been looking for uh, the black media at the time. Are those newspapers available? Do they have the newspapers that she owned? Do they have the volumes available at all? Or are they just kind of somewhere gone with history?
Yeah, unfortunately, they're very, very difficult to find. So, Ida wrote about some of the things that she wrote in the newspaper, but I don't know anybody who's been able to find copies of the original newspapers.
Ah,
That's really unfortunate part of
yeah.
our history that is lost. But in Ida Be the Queen, I really tried to incorporate as much as I could primary documents of Ida's and excerpts of some of her work, some of her journal entries, so that people could get a sense of her personality and the times that she lived in.
So I'm curious to know. I'm not sure if you know that. I don't know if it's in the book or not. But where was Ida B. Wells politically? And I ask this because when she's coming up, we're in a really interesting political time. Reconstruction is basically over. The Democrats and Republicans as well, because they were considered the quote unquote party of civil rights, turned their backs on black folks with the 1877 compromise. And you have W.E.B. Du Bois, who was more of a socialist to some degree, not the way we think about socialism now, right? So where was Ida B. Wells? Do we know where was she politically? Because sadly she wasn't able to vote, which is despicable. But where was she? Where was she politically?
Well, at the time that my great grandmother Ida B. Wells was growing up, the political parties were almost the opposite of what they are today.
Yeah.
Because the Republican Party was considered the party of Lincoln, and most Black people who could vote, and people could vote right after Reconstruction because of the 15th Amendment that was in 1870. So the Black men who could vote mostly were Republican, because that was the party of Lincoln that was involved, at least in freeing slaves.
Yeah.
So and that was the party that was involved in actually the Freedmen's Bureau, constructing the Freedmen's Bureau and that kind of thing. So she was a Republican most of her life, even when she was in Chicago, she was involved in the Second Ward Republicans Party, which some people take out of historical context because that was the Progressive Party at that time that was about more civil rights for Black people. Things changed, I think, in the 60s when there was the Southern Strategy. So she really did sort of align herself with that party and the platform that they had at the time, which was different than it is now.
Absolutely. It's interesting to hear that because you think of Du Bois being, I feel like in the 1920s or so, you really see this movement for Black folks to separate from either party. So Du Bois is embracing socialism. Then, of course, what is it? The messenger, is it the messenger or the crisis? So forgive me, but there was like a reaction to Du Bois and all these kind of folks and saying, okay, how are we going to be even more radical? So that's just really incredible. Also in the book, what you do is you highlight other women. You have this whole section where you all throughout the book you're highlighting other women. Speak to that.
Right. Well, one of the goals that I had with Ida B. the Queen was to introduce Ida to a new audience and introduce her in a different way. I wanted to put her into a historical context of the 400 years of Black resistance and progress, and also help people understand how the legacy that she had and the work that she did is being continued today. So I did incorporate several people who are current to us that I think are very much working in her tradition. And the whole continuum, for instance, Shirley Chisholm was a political trailblazer who I feel, continued some of the work that Ida was doing several years or several decades after Ida passed away. And then all the way to Kamala Harris, who we just saw was, inaugurated into the VP's position. So to me, that's a continuum of the work that Ida was doing as a suffragist.
Do you think that Ida B. Wells, like my grandfather passed away many years ago in 1999. My grandfather was raised in the Jim Crow South of Virginia. He never saw a world where a Black man would be president. My grandfather said that ain't never going to happen. But do
Mhm.
you think Ida B. Wells, do you think she saw a world where a Black woman would be vice president of these United States?
One of my goals with Ida Be the Queen was to hopefully give people a sense of her personality, and I always got the impression that she was an optimist almost to um, an extreme, because she truly believed that this country, that Black people deserved and would be able to achieve full citizenship, and when meaning that we could all benefit from all this country had to offer: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so, the fact that she ran for state senate in Illinois in 1930, to me shows that ultimately she believed that Black women not only could vote, but be political candidates and winners. So I don't think she would be surprised. I think she would actually be surprised that it took 90 years after she died for that to be achieved.
Mm, that is incredible. That's so inspiring to hear. One of the things that I often hear is, and I struggle with this because I wasn't, raised in the Jim Crow South. I was obviously not raised in the 1800s, but I hear a lot of people say that things haven't changed that much. Things are the same. And I don't know. I pause when I hear, but then I think, okay, I see why folks feel that way. But considering what you know of the legacy of Ida B. Wells and the way that she fought, what do you say to folks? Is it accurate that things haven't changed that much?
I think that, I mean, and this was one of my goals with Ida Be the Queen, was to show how there has been progress, but then there are some struggles that are still remnants of what Ida was working towards or fighting against when she was alive. I mean, she wrote about lynching, mob rule, and lawlessness that was taking place during her time. And just a few weeks ago, we saw a mob, descend upon the Capitol. So one could argue that there is still that those that attitude that people can sort of take over law. But then at the same time, you have Kamala Harris, who was just elected as vice president. So I think it's a mixture of progress, but then also backlash and anger against Black progress.